Good morning, the world, or maybe good evening, or maybe good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. Welcome back to the hot and spicy conversations with Cristina, Davy, all the way from Australia, and myself, Olga, Geidane, all the way from sunny for once Leeds. Anyways, we wonder where are you joining us from? Please do let us know your location. We want to see how far this show is going, hopefully far and beyond. In any case, we're excited to have another uh, beautiful topic today with Cristina for you. We are presenting that for your consideration. We would like to hear your opinions and your stories. And I would like to ask Cristina, would you like to announce that, my darling?
Sure, my pleasure. So I think everybody's going to need this because we all have relationships. It doesn't have to be an intimate relationship, it can be any relationship.
Yeah.
What are the biggest communication mistakes we make in a relationship? And I think, this particular topic should draw a lot of attention because let's be honest, communication, oh my gosh, like can really break or, really get the gap smaller between two people. So for me, Olga, I was just thinking how will I start the podcast, and I think I really have to start with this one thing. So I think the biggest mistake we can make in our communication is to focus on what we don't want and try to communicate at all times just what we don't like. You know how it's all about communicating boundaries right now and everybody's focusing so much about it, but I think there's not a problem with communicating boundaries. It's just that if we just communicate boundaries, we can come across really harsh and critical as well. So just be mindful, what do you communicate in your relationship, in most instances? Is it what you want and what you don't want? And are you being specific enough when you are expressing what you want? What do you think, Olga?
Oh, I agree with you. The more you focus on negative, the more negative you will get. That's just general rule, okay? That's just general rule. So you got to focus on the opposite. 100%, my darling. I totally agree with you. And I wonder, have you been, our dear listeners, have you been in the situation when you're speaking with your partner and they keep telling you about what they don't want, and you're like, but what do you want? But tell me, what do you want? Seriously, it happens so many times, even with my clients, when I work on their lives, when I work on their identities, where they're going, and I'll ask them, okay, I get it. You don't want what you always had, you don't want who you always were, but what would you like? And they're like, well, I don't know what I want, but I'll tell you what I don't want. Oh, hold on, right?
Mm.
So I agree with you. It's easier for us to focus on what we don't want because it's right in our face. But we got to stop and ask ourselves, what do I actually want? So I completely agree with you, my darling. It's totally spot on. We got to focus on
Mm.
what do we want. When it comes to biggest mistakes in relationships, I would like to add this one. Probably people will laugh about it, but lack of communication.
Aha.
I think the biggest mistake when it comes
Is
to
not to
communication
talk
in
about it.
relationships is just lack of communication. Seriously, it's so bizarre. Think about it, right? So I observe so many couples being in a restaurant or being in the car, being on their walks, whatever. And if you listen to their conversations, if you can, of course, right? You usually hear some mundane conversations like children, the after school clubs, the plans for the weekend or something. And I'm like, where is the soul conversation? Where is the conversation about what bothers you? Where is the conversation where invulnerability is, right? Where is the
Mm.
conversation about your fears and your insecurities? Where is the conversation about how can I help you to grow more as a human, not about your goals, right? Only, but where is the real life conversations, right? People keep surface level of conversations and then they wonder why we're not connected. Well, because it's surfaced level conversations. You
Mm.
got to have real communication. You got to have communication soul to soul, heart to heart, which are so scary. Let's
They
admit it.
are, isn't? Yeah, because they like people fear conflict and they fear being seen, and I definitely can resonate with it. I find myself sometimes wanting to avoid a conversation because I don't know what outcome is going to come out of it. and I'm constantly looking like, tell me if, and if you're listening to this podcast right now, tell me this: have you ever postponed having that conversation just because you're fearing being seen? Being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you're exposing yourself to be hurt at the same time as well, and it becomes such a big thing that we don't want to sit with the uncomfortable feeling of I don't know, roughing up the feathers, so to speak.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
so the lack of communication usually comes because we just want to avoid conflict. We don't want to be abandoned. We don't want to feel rejected. We don't want to feel unliked. And
so
it's
true.
so easy to fall into this trap. I totally agree. And I think we have to also be mindful of the masculine and feminine, how the masculine is
Mhm.
not really into talking. Talking is connecting, being present with your feelings. So that's quite uncomfortable for the masculine.
True.
Isn't So yeah, you brought up a really good point. Understanding what does the trying to understand what does the other person need as well, not just what you need. We're so focused on what we need. What I need from you is this. What I need from you is this. But what do you need? Are
Yeah.
you able to express what do you need
Mm.
from the other person? So then they also get some guidelines in how to navigate the whole relationship,
Absolutely.
how they can show up for you. I think that's
Absolutely.
important.
Mm,
Mm.
mm, thank you for that add-on. Absolutely. It's like one of those questions which we actually can ask each other, but we don't, but we should be asking each other. And whenever my clients are applying that, it always works 100%. So whenever I also apply, of course, it also works 100%. It's just this question, you know, what can I do for you to feel safer to open up to me?
Mm.
What can I do for you to feel safe with me so you can
Yes.
open up and talk about yourself? Right? And
Mm. Oh,
typically,
so yes, I love it. I
just
love it.
think
I love
about
it. It's
that, right?
such a powerful question.
Exactly. Because typically people would say, well, I already feel safe. And that already allows them to open up because they just
Mm.
realize that there's nothing that you do making them feel unsafe. So they can open up. But for some reason, they were telling themselves a little lie that don't feel safe. Right? Or if
Mm.
they don't feel safe, it could be like, especially when it comes to man and woman communication, very often the woman would be like, okay, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me now, without waiting for men to come up with their thinking about, right? We would think
Mm.
aloud. We just bubble and just blur it out. Okay, that's how we think. For men, they have to
Mm.
compose themselves. They have to find the thought, connect with that, and deliver that. So if you don't give them time, they're not going to tell you. So it's being patient with
Mm.
men. And very often we just forget about it. Oh, anyways, let's go to your tip because I can just, as you can tell, I can just give you
I
lots of
totally
yeah.
I totally, yeah, you're really right. Like I resonate with that strongly. And
Mm,
um I think something else that I would like to bring to everyone's attention is that you need to communicate your standards in advance. So communicate what you like, okay, and what you don't like in advance. As you share about, the more you share about you, the more opportunities the other person has to get to know you, has to get to understand you. So don't wait until somebody's crossing your or stepping on your toes in order to communicate what's important to you. And because most of the time in that moment we tend to be triggered already because of what
mm,
has happened. So when we communicate um, with the emotions that we feel at the time. So if you're frustrated, impatient, upset, I don't know, angry, fearful, it's gonna come through your voice, and then the other person doesn't really understand what's happening, doesn't have the
mm,
background of what you're thinking, what's your perception like. So, you communicating standards in general when you have that one on one conversation at dinner or as you walk holding hands in the park or just having a coffee, best thing to do is like, I love to do this, and the reason I love doing it is because of this. And then this way, you give them the opportunity to get to know you a little bit.
Mm.
So keep that in mind as well.
Oh, absolutely. Spot on, Christina, spot on. Well, see, that's why your program, when it comes to single women, to finding themselves and finding how to communicate themselves is so powerful. Because if ladies haven't learned how to communicate their own needs, their own boundaries, their own standards to themselves, how could they communicate them to their future partners? Right? So seriously,
Mm.
if you're still thinking about, I would like to be in a relationship and I'm single lady, reach out to Christina because she has all the knowledge. As you can hear it, she's just sharing that with you right now here. Absolutely. And you
Thank you.
highlighted something there, Christina, that
Likewise.
really I like what you highlighted there. Is like very often, as I said earlier on, we keep it very surfaced, but also we forget that sometimes we are bringing secondary reasons, secondary things, secondary topics rather than a real one, rather than a real emotion, rather than a real thing into our conversation. And I like, especially when it comes to arguments, to ask this particular question: what are we really arguing about?
Mm.
Or if a person is upset, and it's like, oh, I'm furious, I'm this, I'm that, okay, and they give you all the reasons why they're upset or furious or whatever else, and you're asking them, but what are you really upset about? And the truth is, there's always another, a lot deeper layered answer to that, right? And
Oh, well,
typically,
yes. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And typically, let's admit it, it's because you were triggered by something your partner did. Okay, they
Mm.
did not do it even deliberately in most cases. But what we got to remember that our partners are there. We are there for each other to help us to heal what we didn't heal from our childhood. Okay, and our
Mm.
partners inevitably they will trigger the deepest traumas within ourselves. Whether we choose to see it and heal it or not, that's a different conversation. But typically, they will
Mm.
say something and you'll be like, oh, yeah, I grew up with this, and that's why I will never tolerate that. But how about healing that part? How about bringing different perspective to that? How about becoming better version of yourself and being grateful for your partner beautifully mirroring for you what you had to heal,
Mm. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I totally agree with you. And not just that, but what I realized, uh, what I realized in my own relationships over the years, and coaching people, is that we question the other person intent, right? And when we question the other person's intent, what happens is we project our biggest fears. So
Mm.
what we perceive as happening is not necessarily what has happened, but we build that story based on our wounds. We build the story based on um, us not feeling significant, not feeling heard, not feeling seen, not feeling understood in the moment. And it's triggering because most of the time in our head we have the worst case scenario, one of the worst case scenario, because we want to protect ourselves and we want to pull out. So now we are responding and feeling emotions not to what happened really, but but based on what we think it happened, and it might have absolutely nothing with what really the other person wanted. And then we're like, no, but you're lying, that's not true, I know that's not true. And then and we're all human, we all like, I have to admit, I have not perfected this can happen to any of us, when we just go like, no, I know what you want, and instead of seeking to understand, we already know, and
Mm.
we react and we get upset to the story that we form in our head. So be
Mm.
mindful. Have you asked, the person, what caused them to do that, what caused them to say that, what was happening behind the scene, what was the thought process? Stay curious to find out, because you might find out something that I'm not saying is going to sometimes it's not necessarily going to to take away from the pain, but at least it gives you, an understanding, and you get a little bit more of the tension resolved, and that in itself can be quite peaceful. So
Spot on.
often, often in these kind of situations, I think one of a big, big, big mistake in communication is that when we feel this way, when we feel triggered, we attack the person's
Mm,
character, and we go, liar, I can never trust you. You're not to be trusted,
mm,
or you always hurt me, or so that's when it becomes, very hurtful to the other person, because now you are, in a way, a perpetrator, in a sense that,
mm.
you're pointing fingers and blaming, and then the other person, it's either going to shut down or start defending, which is going to create more conflict. So be mindful of questioning other people's intent, and rather just seek to understand, so you can like just find out their intentions there. What was the intention, what caused them to say or do that thing, and often you're going to find out it was actually something that you did that they misread. They understood wrong. Do you find that, Olga?
Absolutely, and you're right, because we are typically projecting our fears, our insecurities to other people. So if we are lying, we will expect everybody to lie. If we are hiding something, we will expect everybody to hide something, right? So when you attack somebody with saying, "Oh, like you do this, you do that," of course, it's not going to lead to better communication. But if you will
Mm,
just understand that, and I'll go to my point about this as well, which is naturally coming from what you said, Christina. But if we just understand that we are always behaving based on our coping mechanisms, which were
mm,
developed as a result of our traumas in our childhood, we will be completely different at looking at our partners, right? Because the reason why a person maybe lied in this situation, because that was their safety zone for that moment, right? That
yeah.
they are afraid facing the truth for them is scarier than lying. And and everybody also knows, I just divorced, well, a couple of months ago now, a liar and a cheater. But the thing is, it's been 3 years, and this person was not willing to change his behavior, even though he had plenty of chances, right? So
Mm,
even though as a coach and being the person I am, I understood why he was doing that. I understood his reasons. It was not about forgiving, it was about understanding that was his coping mechanism, right? If you give person chance to grow and change, they might use it and they might grow. I can't guarantee they will, because I eventually just divorced him because 3 years later he's still not changing, right? But that's his choice, okay? But when you understand and when you give the room for people to really grow, they might take it. But remember, it's not your responsibility to keep understanding the do nothing. That's why going back to
mm,
standards, you got to communicate your standards and you got to say, I'm sorry, but what you still continue doing, even though I understand it's a coping mechanism, but that's below my standards. And that's exactly what I
mm.
announced to my husband. I said, look, I'm grateful to see who you still are, but I'm walking out. I'm walking out
Yeah,
because that's below
and
my
I
standards.
and I will also add to that, that it's important to share how it makes you feel, because
Yes,
they
absolutely.
don't feel the same way, because they're not experiencing when you're experiencing. So if you share how something makes you feel and
Mm,
why it becomes intolerable for you,
mm,
then it's giving them, even if you feel remorse when you hear that, that's the first process in healing. That's the process, feeling guilt and shame and remorse. It's a good thing. It's what's going to help you, start showing up in a different way, or doing it differently, so you can actually have more of the intimacy and closeness and openness and love that you want. So keep that in mind as well.
It's so true. It's so true.
Mm.
Absolutely true. And Christina, I just would like to share one more tip if that's okay. And that's something what you were talking about, but this one naturally comes out from your previous tip. And that's listening to understand rather respond, right? It just
Oh,
naturally comes out from a
yes.
previous point, right? Because very
Mm.
often we're listening, especially in an argument, and we are waiting for that pause right? To just jump in and to say what we feel, what we think, whatever it is happening in our world, right? Rather than listening to understand. And
Yeah,
when we listen to
yeah, big one.
understand, this is when we take relationship, communication, our relationship to the next level, because we really are
Mm,
seeking understanding of our partner's behavior, their coping mechanisms, their insecurities, their fears, why they do what they do, and we try to understand rather than we just respond. And it's understandable why we want to respond, because we want to protect ourselves. But
mm,
when two people are in a mode of just responding rather understanding, you cannot have next level communication. You cannot. You will have only surface level of communication without going deeper, without learning about each other and yourself. So listen to
yeah.
understand
I
rather just to
love that.
respond.
Yes, 100%. Totally. Yes. Now
Yeah.
it always seems so much easier to say than do. Just be mindful that your emotions will always come in the way. And prevent you from applying. But really, you're gonna learn from the doing, from
Mm.
practicing communication and being okay to make mistakes along the way.
That's very true.
Oops.
Absolutely. Oh, there we go. I
Sorry.
got you back. It's okay.
So just that in itself, it's gonna support you. So
Mm.
anyway, well, thanks a lot for tuning in. For those of you who need some support in closing the gap between you and your partner, for those of you who want to improve your communication and you feel like everything that we just said doesn't apply to you, then well, make sure to reach out to Olga. She will give you some tips. She has amazing programs where she can show you another way of
Mm.
creating intimacy, vulnerability, honesty in your relationship, and really attraction as well. Because sometimes we feel like, oh, it's all dead because it's been it's been quite a while. But just yeah, just reach out. Make sure you book a call, sign up for her programs. I have learned myself so much during our conversations and my collaborations with Olga. So do yourself a favor and reach out for sure.
Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate your kind words. And as I was mentioning earlier on, if you're that single lady and you want to put the ring on your finger, then definitely reach out to Christina because she has amazing, outstanding, and mind-blowing program for single ladies in order for you to learn more about yourself. As I mentioned earlier on, learn about your standards, learn about your boundaries and more, right? In order for you to step into the most amazing relationships. And then, of course, bring your partner to my program. I could not say that.
100%.
Exactly. We'll
We
take you on
don't
the journey,
know.
right, from Christina.
We don't know. That's what it is. We all think we're doing
Mm,
everything right, but we learn in the process. Yeah, that's the thing, and no matter
so
how
true.
much theory it's when you actually face those challenges that you really have the biggest breakthroughs and really make some changes. So thank you so much, Olga. I look forward to see you next week, darling.
Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate your input today and all your wisdom, which is amazing. And I'm really looking forward to have you next week again. And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. Let us know where you were watching us from, and we'll see you next week for